Whatever his success may owe to judgment, careful planning, fortunate timing, plain dumb luck, Barack Obama might very well want to quit now while in the area of trying to make himself look like a commander-in-chief. He is ahead. In our fourth story on the countdown, the senator taking a position on which other key players agree. It's starting to look like a trend. Perhaps the Bush administration and the campaign of Senator McCain should have read the tea leaves from a basketball shot when Obama kicked off his foreign tour with a stop at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait. After the aw shucks disclaimer, I may not make the first one, there it is, way downtown. Bang! Senator Obama's meeting with President Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan on Saturday given seemingly unintentional support from General David Petraeus, who acknowledged in the verbal equivalent of a long three-pointer interview that al-Qaeda may be shifting its focus back to Afghanistan and Pakistan. And, of course, the agreement between Senator Obama and Iraqi Prime Minister al-Maliki on Iraq's future provided a huge exclamation point by the White House's befuddled attempts to tamp it down. Let's bring in MSNBC political analyst Rachel Maddow, who hosts her own show on Air America Radio and occasionally this one. Rachel, good evening.
Hi, Keith.
The politics in a moment of this, but are we missing the real headline here? The Iraqi government is saying, get out. And President Bush swore, if someday they say get out, we'll get out.
That's right. May 2007 in the Rose Garden, Bush said, and I went back and checked the quote directly so I could be sure to directly quote him, if they were to say leave, we would leave. Also, for what it's worth, in April of 2004, John McCain at the Council on Foreign Relations said it is obvious we would have to leave if they asked us to leave. I mean, they told us that the point of invading Iraq was to topple Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was toppled. They told us that the point of staying thereafter was to set up a sovereign Iraqi government. Well, now the sovereign Iraqi government is standing up on its hind legs enough to tell us to leave. And we're left with this situation where they need another explanation of why we can't leave. That's the real headline here. I mean, I think that Chris Hayes got it exactly right. They have defined winning as staying. They need a new explanation, though, for why it is that we're staying.
The purpose of the war in Iraq is to maintain a war in Iraq. Listen, Kuwait, Afghanistan, now these developments in Iraq with the assist from the White House and from Senator McCain. This Obama trip, very risky, very potentially disastrous for him if the wrong notes were hit. Instead, they're already at the kind of critical mass I imagine their advisors could have only dreamed. Can it get better from here, or can it only get worse?
You would understand the impulse at this point for them to just say, okay, trip's over, let's quit while we're ahead. Even if you imagine...
please.
Yes, exactly. We're not going to wrap this one up. I mean, you can imagine them at Obama headquarters sort of making a best-case scenario, worst-case scenario list for things that could happen on this trip. And I don't think that I can imagine them ever being optimistic enough to put war ends on Obama's terms in the best case scenario column for this trip. I mean, short of Zawahiri and bin Laden throwing themselves on his feet for mercy, I'm not sure what else they're looking for here.
But could there be a backlash politically on this? Because even Obama said, remember, one president at a time. Here the Iraqis do make the biggest policy statement in their government, this government's history. They make it to Obama. Could there be some blowback on the political end that he's essentially usurped, not McCain, but President Bush?
Well, it was interesting that Obama started this trip on that note of humility. As you said, he said there can only be one president at a time. I am traveling there as a United States senator. He didn't make any public comments for the start of his trip, and he has approached it with that humility. But I think you're right. We are seeing a little bit of backlash. It's just important politically to note that the only backlash against this has been in Washington. In Iraq, the Iraqi people have long wanted us to leave. Looking down at the prospect of provincial elections happening this fall, or maybe they're getting pushed back to this winter, Iraqi politicians are eager to side with the Iraqi people and tell the U.S. troops to go home. I mean, right now we've got the Iraqi people, the American people, the Iraqi government, the man who is most likely to be the next United States president, and honestly, the U.S. military, all saying that we either should or need to leave, or at least drastically scale back very soon. The only people on the other side of the equation right now are John McCain, George W. Bush, and the Cheney family.
Well, and that's the last question about how they reacted to this in sort of isolation, Bush and McCain both. How did they think they would get away with blaming all this on bad translation by a German magazine when the translator didn't work for the magazine, but he worked for Prime Minister Maliki.
It's such an interesting point about how this all unfolded. Because remember, it was just a few weeks ago when Maliki first announced, just a couple of weeks ago, when he first announced that he wanted a definite timetable. And the response from the State Department spokesman was maybe he was mistranslated. Well, of course, he wasn't. John McCain's reaction to that initial statement from Maliki about wanting a timetable was that somehow perhaps the media had gotten this wrong, and they didn't. But now we're seeing this again. There must have been some translation error. They've released the audio of it, so we know there wasn't an error. It seems like kind of a sad approach to trying to make this go away rather than just saying they disagree with it.
Yeah, extraordinary. Rachel Maddow, we'll do this differently this time. I'll be back tomorrow from here, but right now I have to get back to this convention of TV critics and answer more questions about your eyeshadow choices. So congrats. You get promoted from guest to host. Take it from here.
All right. Thank you, Keith. Sorry about the eyeshadow questions.